For just any reason, let's talk about Stephen King. Hello, everybody. My name is Rob. This is my mom, Karen. You're watching Books, Banter, and Beyond. And whether it's the morning, evening, or afternoon, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you guys have been enjoying this series thus far. We've had a blast making it, and we got so much more fun stuff to do. Just like today's. Today, probably still and will always be, for some weird reason, my favorite author. I don't know why. Strange guy, strange author, but I love him. He's wonderful. The king of horror himself, Stephen King. I always love how that just worked out so well because
It's his real name, right?
Stephen. Um, yes, everything I've looked up on him, Stephen King, I feel is his birth name.
Yeah.
So it just so worked out that the king of horror works out with him.
Worked out perfectly.
There you go. But he is one of the most prolific and influential authors of contemporary fiction, specifically known for his horror, suspense, and supernatural themes. Can you believe it, though? 1974 was when he got his start. You remember which one it was? Everybody does. It was Carrie. Of course, we had everything else afterwards, but that's what got him started. Now, what's funny is, like many authors, both he and some publishers, when they first took it, they weren't sure. They're like, this is weird. Nobody's going to want to read this. And even King himself has been known to say that when he wrote it, he wasn't sure if this was going to fly. And man, were they both very wrong.
Right.
This flew him off the shelf so quickly that he literally started writing, I think, back to back almost, so many books. What he does best, I think, and you say it well when you say creepy, is he delves into the human psyche, which is something that really is scary for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
He has proven, unlike other horror that uses physical monsters, that you don't need a visual. It's the brain that is actually creating the fear, right? And it's funny because I know, obviously, depending on when you grew up, you were younger when he was bigger, me being younger when he was already big. I think it also visually, decade-wise, it looks a little bit different. To me, especially now when you rewatch or you reread, it's a very odd choice of storyline. You kind of sit and go, wow, this guy maybe has some demons literally he's dealing with. And yeah, he has come out to say that he's dealt with different things like alcoholism and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff that happened to him that affected what he wrote. But generally, and I'll throw this to you really quick, do you think, decade-wise and when you grew up, do you think his books hold different feelings from when maybe he first started to maybe somebody like me who grew up when he was already bigger?
I don't know. I mean, I can only relate to when I first knew about who he was.
Right.
It scared the crap out of me. I mean, seriously, I was like, even to this day, I will watch that kind of movie like this. So, but if you're not but if you don't get fearful, meaning that it will keep you up all night long and you're never going to, go to sleep again, like you are, I don't know. You might have you probably reacted to it completely different, which having nothing to do with what decade you happen to watch it. You just have a different sense of, in my opinion, a different sensibility for these kind of movies. Whether I watched it back in the 70s or if I were to watch it now or read it now, I would have the same exact visceral fear of, because it's what your head literally pictures in your own head, rather than just watching it. So.
Yeah, no, it came to mind as just we were talking just now, because, I think a lot of times when you're reading a book, sometimes it has to do with the culture of the time. A lot of authors will write about a historical event, the names have been changed to not, whatever. But sometimes it might just flow so well that no matter when you live or where you live, it still hits the same way.
Well, Rob, as an example, in 1974, when Carrie came out, and it's about a teenage girl, right?
Right.
I was graduating high school.
Oh, okay.
So it was, I think, scarier because of that. Because here I was in a high school situation. This kind of takes place, if I'm not mistaken. There are some situations with teenagers, and
Teenagers being teenagers. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So that hit being maybe that was different. Maybe that was different because it was coming out
Right.
at the time that I was actually in that circumstance, as I recall it. That was kind of scary.
And if anybody has read his on writing book, it's basically the story of how he became what he was
Mhm,
and all this stuff. It's an interesting, interesting guy. And it's not to say he's the only person that's dealt with issues. I know many authors have dealt with different kinds of things. But
mhm.
when you hear somebody or read about somebody and being open about the many traumas they might have done, you do kind of, you take into account maybe some of this was written to expel some of the negative energy inside. You have books like, for instance, The Shining, one of his biggest ones,
Right,
and it's about, the relationship of family and about the, what happens when you're in the situation and you kind of go stir crazy, but it's not so much that the character in the book goes nuts and tries to kill everybody. It's the idea of, what would happen if you do kind of lose contact with the real world,
right,
stuff like
right,
that. You have books like It, where the clown character basically just represents general fear. It's not so much that you're being chased by a killer clown. It's that guy represents everything that scares you, as you put it. He represents any fear you have. And I think even in the book, he's able to transform into each character's specific fear,
yeah.
which
Well,
makes it that much more
and there
sentimental in a way, right?
there
Because
are a
you're
lot yeah, exactly, and there are a lot of people who have real fears of clowns, like, they
well,
are
yeah, and even on top of it, yeah.
right, on top of it, so it's almost like a double whammy there, right?
And then you have books like Misery, which is totally off the cuff. And if for those who haven't, just a very basic one. Everybody's seen the movie, I'm sure, but basically it's a character who's obsessed with an author so much that she kidnaps him to make him write a book about her.
Right,
And it's such a weird idea. And again, not to say this stuff happens normally,
right, right,
but
right,
it's the idea of obsession, right? It's the
right,
idea of want, so much want
right.
that you can't connect fiction from reality, right?
Right, and so how do you think, Stephen King's portrayal of ordinary characters in
Ah,
extraordinary situations, contribute to suspense and horror in his novels?
so I'll start off with actually his non-horror things like Shawshank Redemption, things like The Green Mile. Those books are just as awesome because they're literally just stories about people, and
Mhm,
they're just stories about you know men and women who are surviving basically. And then when you add in the supernatural elements like It, like The Shining, like Carrie, it just takes it to another level. And I think because he's giving you a story about just some random dude, some random lady,
mhm,
and saying this is what happens when you kind of let your mind
right,
go too far.
right,
And that's what he does. He takes the ordinary out of extraordinary,
mhm,
but he proves that the extraordinary is just as real as it is fiction. You know what I mean? And it's
right,
a very weird way. I don't know how, but it's a very weird way of storytelling.
right.
So,
Do you think his influence has extended past the horror genre?
I mean, like I've said, he's dealt with things like alcoholism, like I think with some parental issues when he was younger. So I think a lot of things that he writes are probably inadvertently stories that may have happened to him when he was growing up. And it's not to say that's a bad thing. A lot of authors will do that.
Right,
People like Hemingway, for instance, who dealt with a lot of problems. All of his stuff is still high up on the list, right? And a lot of it's kind of sad,
right,
but it's a way of sharing your feelings in a way that you don't have to say this happened to me, but it did happen to me. You know what I mean? And I think that's how King, among others, surpasses the just writing a story and basically has you feel a story.
Do you have a favorite Stephen King book?
I would say, I mean, they're long. I would say between Shining and It, probably because as as annoying as it is of how detailed he can get, I feel like those two books to me he put the most time into as far as writing a story. I
Hmm.
love all of his stuff. You know, there's little ones like Cujo. I like things like Carrie. But I think for writing purposes, in my mind, The Shining and It are probably the only books that are long that I actually can read again because of the style. So versus like let's say trying to read Lord of the Rings again, which is just verbose, I can read Stephen King because it catches you every time, no matter what. So
Which is
and I think everybody has their favorites, right? But I think those two for me hit harder than others.
and he's one of your favorite authors too. I mean, so
Yeah, I mean,
there's that.
yeah. At the end of the day, I guess I'm biased. He is one of my favorite authors. He will always be. But yeah, I mean, even if I didn't know him as well as I did, I think those two books show his creative ability along with his storytelling, along with his real life
Right,
as well.
right.
So, you know,
Well, we're at that part of the show, Rob. We send people over to the bookstore. So go ahead and get your phone out. If you scan the QR code that's on the far left, you're going to go right into the paperbacks and hardbound section. All sorts of great titles. And remember, this is a gently used bookstore, which means that you're going to get some really, really good deals. In the middle is the comic books. If you are into comic books, go ahead and scan that. And finally, check out some of the merchandise, T-shirts and mugs and other collectibles. Rob is wearing the T-shirt right now. Go check it out. I love talking about authors. I think that we can learn so much about life
yeah.
at the period of time that they were writing, and what were they thinking. And I love that. I love that about that. So go out, give somebody an awesome day. Rob, I'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.
I guess.